Ken and Linda had been together for 9 years, their love a testament to the strength of their bond. Their journey had begun in their early college days, a tale that most people envied. Ken was the perfect boyfriend, attentive, caring, and deeply in love with Linda. He came from a wealthy, disciplined family and had a calm demeanor that made him approachable to everyone. He was the kind of person who could make anyone feel comfortable, and for Linda he was her world. Linda, in contrast, was fiery and passionate, quick to anger but fiercely loyal. She had always surrounded herself with friends, but there was one person she trusted above all others: Nancy. Nancy was Linda's childhood friend, the one person Linda believed would never betray her. Their bond seemed unbreakable, but what Linda didn't know was that Nancy secretly harbored feelings for Ken. She had always admired him from afar, and the intensity of her feelings had grown over the years. One evening everything changed. Nancy decided it was time to confess her feelings to Ken. She had been hiding them for too long and could no longer ignore the desire she felt. She went to Ken's house, intent on telling him everything. Ken was surprised by her visit. "Where are you heading to?" he asked as he opened the door. "I came to see you," Nancy replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I need to talk to you about something important." Ken was taken aback. "You're here alone. That's unusual. None of Linda's friends ever come to my place without her." Nancy, feeling the pressure of her confession, urged him to listen. "It's not about Linda, Ken. It's about you and me." Ken didn't know what to expect, but what Nancy said next would change everything. With a calm but deliberate voice, Nancy confessed her love. "Ken, I've been in love with you for so long. I can't keep this inside anymore. I know it's wrong, but I can't help it. You mean everything to me." Ken was stunned. His mind raced, trying to process the gravity of Nancy's words. I don't understand. What are you saying, Nancy?" he stammered. Nancy's expression hardened as she pressed on, her emotions bubbling over. "Ken, I've kept this secret for years, but now I can't hold it in. Love you. And Linda, she doesn't deserve you. She's been cheating on you. I know it." Ken recoiled at the accusation. "What? That's ridiculous. Linda would never." But Nancy was insistent. She had built this story in her mind, one where Linda had betrayed Ken. She even convinced him by pretending to receive a threatening phone call, a call that was meant to intimidate him. She played it for him, trying to make him believe that Linda's actions were unforgivable. "Listen to the voice," she said, holding her phone to Ken's ear. "Stay away from Linda. She doesn't deserve you." Ken's mind began to spin. He had always trusted Linda, but now doubts crept in. Could Nancy be telling the truth? Was Linda really cheating on him? And if so, what did that mean for their relationship? The next day, Linda arrived at Ken's house, full of emotion. When she saw Ken, the confusion on his face only made her more furious. "Where's that betrayer?" she demanded. "Ken, how could you do this to me?" Ken, still reeling from Nancy's words, didn't know how to respond. "Linda, I didn't do anything," he said. "You have to believe me." But Linda was past the point of reason. "Don't lie to me. I know what you did, and I won't stand for it." Her anger boiled over, and in a fit of rage, she grabbed a pot of hot oil and poured it onto Ken's back. The searing pain was unimaginable. Ken screamed, clutching at his back, but it wasn't just the physical pain that struck him. It was the betrayal. The woman he had trusted, the one he had loved for years, had turned on him in a moment of anger and suspicion. As Ken stumbled back in agony, he looked at Linda with disbelief. "You'll regret this," he whispered through clenched teeth, the hurt in his voice deeper than the burn on his skin. Linda, in her fury, didn't even seem to hear him. She had acted without thinking, consumed by jealousy and a misguided need to protect her relationship. Ken was rushed to the hospital, and Linda was left alone with her guilt. She had done something unforgivable, something that could never be taken back. Her mother, shocked and furious, slapped her hard across the face. "What have you done, Linda? This is your fault." You've ruined everything. But it wasn't just Linda's mother who was angry. Ken's family, especially his father, a high-ranking army general, was beside himself with fury. Ken had always been the apple of his eye, and to see him in pain like this, knowing that Linda had caused it, made his blood boil. Ken's father stormed to the hospital, ready to take matters into his own hands. His anger was so intense that it scared even his closest friends. Jerry and Kevin, Ken's best friends, stood by, unsure of how to handle the situation. Linda, meanwhile, was consumed with guilt. She had lost Ken, not just physically but emotionally. The damage was done, and now, even if she tried to explain, would he ever believe her again? Days passed, and Ken's condition slowly improved, but his emotional wounds were deep. He felt betrayed by Linda, and the trust they had built over the years seemed irreparable. Meanwhile, Linda's life was falling apart. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and couldn't escape the weight of her actions. One day, after a particularly difficult argument with her mother, Linda went to Ken's house to apologize. She stood in front of him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Ken, please," she begged. "I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I let my anger take over. Please forgive me." Ken, exhausted from the emotional turmoil, looked at her with tear-filled eyes. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Linda," he said softly. "You almost killed me. I don't know who you are anymore." It was then that Linda realized the gravity of what she had done. She had lost the love of her life, and there was no turning back. She had believed in Nancy's lies, and in doing so, she had destroyed everything. Linda had thought she could fix things, that she could make Ken see how deeply sorry she was for her actions. But as she stood there, trying to find the right words, Ken's silence was more deafening than any shout. It wasn't just that she had burned him. She had burned their relationship, their trust, and everything they had built over 9 years. Ken didn't speak at first. The room was thick with tension. After what felt like an eternity, he finally managed to speak. His voice raw with emotion. "Linda, I loved you. I trusted you. But what you did, it's unforgivable." His words pierced through her like a knife. She had no defense. No explanation that could undo the hurt she had caused. It wasn't just the oil, the physical pain. It was the emotional scar. He had seen the betrayal in her eyes, heard the anger in her voice when she poured the oil. It was not just a reaction to the lies of her friend Nancy. It was a manifestation of everything she had allowed herself to believe without giving Ken the benefit of the doubt. Tears welled up in Linda's eyes, but Ken turned away, unable to look at her. "Please leave," he said, his voice breaking. "I need time to think, but right now all I feel is anger. And I don't want to be angry anymore." The days that followed were long and painful for both Ken and Linda. Ken's recovery, both physically and emotionally, took much longer than he expected. His friends, Jerry and Kevin, stayed by his side, offering support, though they couldn't help but wonder if their friendship with Linda would ever be the same. Ken's father, the army general, was furious when he found out about the incident. His protective instincts flared, and he immediately wanted to confront Linda. But after a long discussion with his wife, he reluctantly agreed to let the situation unfold at Ken's pace. He knew that his son needed space to heal and process the betrayal on his own terms. Meanwhile, Linda spent her days in a fog of guilt. She couldn't bear the thought of how she had almost lost everything, how one act of jealousy, one moment of rage, had destroyed the most important relationship in her life. Every night, she lay awake, consumed by the weight of her mistake. Her mother, though disappointed in her, tried to offer comfort. "You must be strong, Linda," she said softly, her tone somber. "You can't change what happened, but you can learn from it." But Linda wasn't sure she could learn anything from it. The pain of losing Ken seemed insurmountable. She realized that in her blind rage, she had pushed him away. Pushed away the only person who had ever loved her so completely, so unconditionally. Weeks passed, and Ken's physical wounds healed. But the emotional ones were another story. His heart was still shattered by the actions of the one person he had trusted above all others. And now, even with time, the doubts lingered. Linda's mother urged her to apologize again. "Don't wait too long, Linda. You never know what could happen," she advised, though there was a tone of concern in her voice. She knew the stakes were high. Ken wasn't just physically healing. He was emotionally shutting down, shutting her out, and it would take more than just a simple apology to fix what had been broken. One morning, after receiving a call from his father, Ken made a decision. He wasn't ready to forgive, but he knew he needed closure. He needed to speak to Linda one last time. It wasn't just for her, but for himself. He needed to find a way to let go of the anger. Linda was at home when Ken knocked on her door. Her heart skipped a beat as she opened it, surprised by his presence. "Ken," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I came to talk," he said simply. "But I don't know if I can ever forgive you. You need to understand how deep the pain goes. You didn't just hurt me, Linda. You hurt everything we were." Linda stepped back, nodding as tears streamed down her face. I know, she said through her sobs. "And I will never be able to take it back. But I'm sorry, Ken. I am so sorry." Ken remained silent, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something he hadn't felt in weeks. A tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could heal from this. "Do you love me, Linda?" he asked quietly. "I love you more than anything in this world," she replied without hesitation. "I made the biggest mistake of my life, and I will spend every day for the rest of my life trying to make it right." Ken looked at her for a long moment, his mind racing. The silence between them was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who had been through something devastating, but had the potential to find their way back to each other. Days passed, and Ken and Linda began to rebuild what had been broken. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick. There were moments when Linda doubted if Ken would ever fully trust her again. But through small gestures, through time spent together, they began to rediscover the bond they had once shared. Ken's friends, Jerry and Kevin, were supportive, but they also warned him to be cautious. They knew Linda's love for him was genuine, but they also understood the weight of what had happened. "Take it slow," Jerry advised one day. "There's no rush. If you're meant to be together, you'll find a way." Ken took their advice to heart. He wasn't ready to dive headfirst into the relationship again, but he wanted to believe in the love they had shared. And slowly, with each passing day, his trust in Linda began to rebuild. Months passed, and Linda's life started to return to some semblance of normalcy. She continued to work on herself, seeking therapy to process her anger and jealousy. She understood that it was her own insecurity that had led her to make such a terrible mistake. But with each session, she felt herself healing, growing stronger, and more certain that she never wanted to lose Ken again. One day, Ken came to her with a smile that was genuine for the first time in months. "Linda," he said, his voice filled with warmth, "I've thought about it, and I think I'm ready to move forward." Linda's heart raced. "You mean?" she asked, holding her breath. Ken nodded. "I want us to try again. I want to rebuild what we had, and I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to try." "Are you?" Linda's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll do anything to make it work. I love you, Ken." And with that, the two of them began a new chapter, one built on forgiveness, trust, and the understanding that love requires patience and effort. As Ken and Linda began to heal and move forward, they found themselves facing challenges, but with a renewed sense of hope. The love they shared, though tested, had proven to be resilient. In the months that followed, they got engaged. Ken's family, who had once been furious with Linda, eventually came around and supported their relationship. Ken's father in particular softened, seeing the growth in both his son and Linda. They eventually got married, and as they prepared to start a family, they reflected on the journey they had been through. In time, they made the decision to move abroad to continue their education and start fresh. It wasn't just about distance. It was about creating a new life together, one free of the mistakes and misunderstandings that had nearly torn them apart. As they boarded the plane to London, hand in hand, They knew that their love story was far from over. It had been tested, broken, and mended, but it was still their story, a story of redemption, growth, and the enduring power of love. Part 12. The end of one journey, the start of another. Years passed, and Ken and Linda built a life together. They became successful, thriving in their careers and creating a family full of love and laughter. And as they looked back on the challenges they had faced, they knew that no matter what came their way, they would always have each other. As for Nancy, the woman who had once tried to tear their love apart, her story was one of loss and hardship. She spent years searching for redemption but never truly found it. Her actions had consequences, and though Linda and Ken had forgiven her, the pain of what she had done was something she would carry for the rest of her life. But for Ken and Linda, the past was a shadow they had learned to embrace. And in the present, they found happiness that no betrayal could ever take from them.